Hello, my lovelies, and welcome to another episode of Somatic Navigation and Intuitive Movement. Today, I want to focus a little bit more on anger and resentment and where you might be storing that in your body and what might be keeping it there. So, some of the things that I've noticed about anger and resentment is that often we hold these things in different parts of our bodies. One of the things that I've noticed is the ear, actually. You have your jugular vein that runs right here, and so like right next to your ear, and I feel like this has a lot to do with why anger and resentment's kind of held a little bit more in the ear or around the ear. The things that you don't want to listen to, the things that you don't want to hear. It's also talking about going for the jugular, like when you think about like animals and stuff, like they talk about going straight for the jugular, going for this vein right here, and being like that, being really like the kill shot kind of thing. And one of the reasons is because it's so vulnerable. So like if you are displaying your neck, you're displaying your vulnerability. And having your ear right here, again, with those things that you're not sure if you really want to hear, or if you're tired of hearing, or you're you're not wanting to hear the truth kind of thing. So those might play into why you might be so angry about things. It's because you don't want to listen, you don't want to hear it. Not to say that like you have to listen to everything that makes you angry, because sometimes you do have a valid point of not wanting to listen to something. And so how this also plays through your body is it's also stored in your liver and your gallbladder. So anger and resentment kind of reside there. And sometimes anger leads to depression. So kind of all of this stuff is kind of playing in together. So give you a little bit of background. Now we'll do some intuitive movement and figure out where I'm currently storing some anger. And if I just kind of think about having my body move in a way that will help release some anger out of my body, and just see where some of the stuff is. Kind of feeling it in my low back. Low back has a lot to do with support, and particularly in right around my SI joint there. So it's that little dimple in your back, and I'm just noticing how everything kind of seems to be, as I'm moving forward or moving in a different direction, it all seems to be tied to this area. This part of your body also has to do with like you being yourself, and not feeling like you have to, or not feeling like you can be yourself. So that can be particularly frustrating. So it makes sense for me why I would be holding some anger right here in this part of my body, or resentment, either one, kind of feeling into both of them. And it's because it has a lot to do with like me just wanting to be myself, and sometimes people don't always appreciate it when you are being yourself, and but telling your body that it's okay, and that in the grand scheme of things, their opinion doesn't really matter to you. Like, they can have opinions. It's not really something that you need to hang on to. And I'm feeling like there's still some more, especially in this back hip area, and so I'm just letting my body move however it wants. Now I'm noticing the shift into my other SI joint. So again, that little dimple in your back where some of those bones come together to form your pelvis. And I'm feeling, I'm looking for other connections throughout my body, but it seems to be very isolated to just my my low back and right around both those little SI joints. And I am noticing that I do have a little bit of tissue that's kind of built up on my left side. So I'm kind of feeling into that and trying to figure what that is all about. It almost feels like some fascia got really stuck, and because it doesn't feel quite like normal tissue, like normal muscle tissue. It feels a little bit more it's a little bit harder, but it's also still squishy. So like I know it's not a bone. And I'm just feeling kind of through that. And as I'm moving, I am noticing the tissue starting to change. It's starting to get a little bit more malleable, a little bit more changed. And so I'm just feeling again right through all of that. Again, my intention is releasing anger and resentment. So my SI joint on my right side would be a lot about work and about being professional and things like that. On my left side, it's a little bit more about relationships and money and things along love and those kind of things. So just kind of noticing the difference in the tissue on both sides and how each one's kind of affected a little bit differently, and how it's affecting how I feel about myself. And if I'm angry and resentful about, you know, this person said this about me and this person said that about me, and I'm not good at doing anything and I don't want to hear it, and kind of rambling like that. When the important part is that you feel good about yourself and that you know that you're doing your best and you are creating the world that you want. And just because that doesn't seem to align with what they want doesn't mean that you're wrong, and it doesn't mean that they're right. And it also doesn't mean, vice versa. So just kind of thinking about that. And so now I'm noticing, just trying to go back to baseline, feel what I'm feeling, see what it feels like now. It feels like when I'm thinking about anger and resentment, I am noticing that my heel on this side isn't quite touching the ground, so I'm going to kind of put some weight into it, pick my toes up off the ground to get my heel on the ground. And I'm still feeling a little bit in this SI joint here, so I'm gonna kind of keep coming around here and see if this changes anything. Noticing something wants to really move, and I don't hasn't quite figured out how it wants to move yet. But it feels like my sacrum wants to move just a little bit. That tailbone wants to kind of shift, and so I'm just kind of feeling through that, noticing what difference that just kind of made. Feels like it's a little bit looser. I still don't quite want to put my heel on the ground, so I'm going to kind of feel into that a little bit and see if I can figure out what exactly. So right here it feels like pretty supported, kind of putting like equal-ish pressure. Most of the pressure is kind of on my heel, but there's still some pressure in my midfoot and the ball of my foot. And just kind of noticing, so here it feels like I need to stand up and like really squeeze my glute. Like this feels really important right now. And you'll notice as you do this more, that you'll start to get like, oh, you know what would feel really great is if I did this, and then if I did this. So right now I'm just kind of following it again and noticing like my glute just relaxed a little bit. And now if I come back to baseline, my heel is much more on the ground, much more centered. How this relates to back to anger and resentment is like digging your heels into something, like being really stubborn. Those kind of emotions and how that kind of plays into anger and resentment. Still kind of noticing that I've got some tension kind of along the border of my sacrum, my tailbone, and then down into like my glutes, and just kind of noticing how right here is now starting to kind of affect the other side a little bit. I'm noticing that there's some tension in my quad on this side when I go into this position. So I'm gonna try to just allow it to relax a little bit and not really activate anything over on this side and see, but it feels like maybe I need to start activating my back chain of muscles here. So like my hamstring and my glutes and my rotators in my hip. And just kind of, again, like now I'm pushing into it, really feeling that stretch right through here, and I'm just noticing how that changes things. And so now we go back to baseline and kind of feeling into my body, and things feel a lot more solid, like foundational wise, like just standing here. I'm also noticing my hips feel a little bit more even. I didn't really realize, I guess, that they were not so even earlier, but now I'm noticing that they do feel a little bit different. And just kind of noticing now how I'm feeling, and if I am bringing up that anger and resentment, where am I feeling this in my body still? And kind of what I'm noticing is like this little pain in my butt, which is often your piriformis muscle, one of your rotators in your hip. And so I'm just putting in a little bit of, again, I'm not really like digging into it. I'm just kind of putting some pressure there so that my body is like aware that this is what I want to work on. And then I am moving through that. And that feels like that's probably good for today on anger and resentment. But I hope that you enjoyed this video and that you found it informational, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Again, you can always check me out on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube at Somato Enlightenment, and I'll see you next time.